Good evening, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshas Tisa, Tavshin Pei Aleph. I dedicate tonight's Drasha in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Parshas Tisa begins with Hashem telling Moshe to tell the Jewish people to give half shekel. And Rashi in his commentary points out that actually the beginning of the parsha that talks about giving the shekel actually alludes to three donations, because it says three times Trumas Hashem, a separation for God, and that actually alludes to three donations that the Jewish people had to give. There was a half a shekel that everybody gave, that was given when they were donating towards the Mishkan, when they were donating towards the materials of the Mishkan. They gave a half shekel. And that half shekel, which again was silver, those half shekalim were used actually to make the adonim, the bases. The Mishkan itself was constructed of krushim, of beams, of boards. And the boards, each board had like two, I think they're called tenons that came out from the bottom, two like sticks that came out from the bottom. And under each tenon there was a socket that was called an adon, a base, and there were two adonim, two bases for each beam. The half shekel that was given, there was an obligation to give a half shekel through which they were counted, and this was then at the same time as donating towards the materials towards the construction of the Mishkan. And that silver was used to make the adonim, to make the silver bases. You also have an allusion to the half shekel that the Jewish people had to give, actually for all generations, towards the Karbanos Tzibur, towards the communal sacrifices. There were communal sacrifices offered in the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash on behalf of for the entire Jewish people. And in order for the entire Jewish people to have a part in that, they had to donate towards it. Every year they gave a half shekel. So here too, so again, the second half shekel that is being mentioned over here, that is being alluded to over here, are the half shekalim that every Jew had to give towards the communal sacrifices. And in both these cases, everybody gave the same amount. Everybody gave a half shekel. Also alluded to in this parsha are the donations toward the construction of the Mishkan, which was completely voluntary, and everybody gave whatever they wanted to give. So those are the three donations that are alluded to, that Rashi brings down, are alluded to in the parsha. We have the half shekalim that were given as part of being counted at the time of donating towards the Mishkan. That silver was used for the bases under the beams of the walls of the Mishkan of the tabernacle. You have the half shekel that was given towards the communal sacrifices. And then you had the donation of the materials towards the construction of the Mishkan that was completely voluntary. So the commentary by Yosef asks the following question. Why in the adonim, these bases that were put under each beam, they were part of the construction of the Mishkan like everything else. Why, when it came to them, did everybody have to give a half shekel? And when it came to the materials for everything else, it was completely voluntary. Why were these bases different? And again, you had a beam, these two tenons coming out from the bottom, and then you had like these squares. And these were the bases that were that the boards were put into. There were two under each one. So again, why were these? Everything else was voluntary. These were mandatory. That's question number one. Question number two is, at least focusing on this donation of the half shekel used for these bases, for these adonim, the bases, why were the Jewish people told to give a half shekel? Why not a whole shekel? Why a half? That's a question that many, many commentaries ask about this half shekel donation. Why a half? The third question is that actually the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, tells us the reason for the half shekel is because the Jewish people, by the sin of the golden calf, before the sin of the golden calf, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people saw that Moshe wasn't coming down from Mount Sinai, which means they were expecting him to come at a certain time, and he didn't. So they were expecting him to come down. Moshe said, I'm going to go for 40 days and 40 nights. So they thought that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to come down on the 40th day, earlier in the day than he came. And by midday, when they saw that he didn't come down, that's when they came to Aaron and said, Moshe is gone. We need a new power instead. So because they sinned at the half point of the day, therefore they bring a half shekel. What does that mean? What's the connection? The last question is that the commentary of Baal HaTurim tells us that the Talmud teaches that a person is supposed to make 100 brachas, 100 blessings every day. The Baal HaTurim says that corresponds to these bases. There were 100 bases that were used in order to be the basis for the beams that made the walls of the Mishkan. There were 50 beams. Again, each one had these two tenons sticking out of it, and there were two bases to each board, to each beam. That means there were 100 of them. Corresponding to the 100 bases are the 100 blessings. Again, what's the connection? So the commentary of Ber Yosef explains in the following way. Many commentaries point out that every part and vessel of the Mishkan corresponds or parallels the world, the human, it parallels the human being, and it parallels the mitzvahs of the Torah. That's what the Mishkan, every part of the Mishkan alludes to, parallels something in the world, the universe, in a person, and in the mitzvahs of the Torah. Which means that all these things all go together as one. So when we talk about, so for instance, the Aron, the Ark, we know that it parallels, it corresponds to the mitzvah of Torah, studying Torah, because the Ark held the tablets, which was the Torah. The Ber Yosef suggests that these adonim, these bases that were put under the boards, they represent a mitzvah that's a base, a foundation for all the other mitzvahs of the Torah. Just like these bases held up the building of the Mishkan and allowed there to be a Mishkan for things to be put in, that foundation, referring to these adonim, these bases that we're talking about, corresponds to a mitzvah that's a basis for everything. And that mitzvah is what we call emunah, our belief in Hashem. The Gemara, the Talmud in Makkos tells us that we were given 613 mitzvahs. B'Chavakuk, there was a prophet named Chavakuk, ve'amidan alachas, and stood them on one, meaning he laid out what's the foundation for all of them. And the answer to that was Tzadik b'emunasa yichya. The righteous person lives by his faith. Our emunah, our belief and faith in Hashem, that is the foundation for all the mitzvahs, which is very understandable. If you believe in God, then there's a foundation for everything. You don't believe in God, it all falls apart. If you believe in God and His Torah, then you're within the fold. A person who does not believe, a person who denies the existence of God, denies the Torah coming from Hashem, is what we call an apikoros, a heretic. Such a person is out of the fold. Because if you don't have emunah, if you don't have faith, if you don't have belief in Hashem, you don't have nothing. Then you don't have anything. So therefore, the Ber Yosef suggests that these adonim that were the base for the Mishkan, they represent emunah. They represent the mitzvah, our belief in Hashem. That's what they represent. Now, with that, he says, let's now try to. So with that, we can explain why everybody had to give a half shekel towards that. Now, I'm going to answer this a little bit differently than I think he says. But the point is that since emunah is the basis for everything, then everybody has to have it. Because without it, you have nothing. So everyone has to donate towards these adonim to impress them, to internalize, for it to be impressed upon them You have to have emunah. You have to contribute to this. You've got to be part of this. You have to be part of emunah. You have to have your faith and belief in Hashem, or else you don't have anything. So having to give, for everyone to have to give to that, was in order to impress upon the people the concept that emunah is imperative for everything that we have. It's the foundation of everything that we have. Okay. Now, why the half shekel? So for this, the Ber Yosef explains in the following way. Because a half shekel means to say it's half. You only have part. And in order for a person to retain their belief in Hashem, they have to understand that when they observe things in the world that make them question Hashem's existence, they have to realize they're only seeing part of the picture. There are many tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people as a nation, people personally, and the question is, where was God? If there's God, where was he? Our faith teaches us that Hashem is always there. Hashem is running everything, and he has his reasons, which are sometimes way beyond us. There will be a point of time when Mashiach comes that everything will come together and we'll understand on a national level, on a personal level, why everything happened the way it did. But right now, we can't do that. So right now, we're always in the middle. We think we're seeing the whole picture, but we're not. We're only seeing part of the picture. And that's being alluded to the half shekel. That when you contribute, when you are going to be part, you're going to have emunah, you're going to have faith in Hashem, which is the basis for everything. You've got to realize that our contribution, so to speak, or what we perceive is half, it's part. We don't see the whole picture. If we would see the whole picture, we'd understand the ways of Hashem, but that's not what we're privy to. Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem in this week's parsha, Hareini na kvodecha, show me your glory, which means to say, tell me how you run the world. Give me the formula that I should be able to understand everything, every way, your way that you run the world, even though there are so many questions. The righteous suffer, the wicked prosper. Give me the formula. Let me know and give me the understanding of how it all comes together. And Hashem said, no human being could be able to fathom that. Moshe Rabbeinu was given the highest level of that, but you can't get it all. And that is the message of the half shekel. And he brings the Ber Yosef brings a famous parable to bring this out. Talks about a rich kid, grows up in the big city, gets fresh bread delivered to his house every day, and he has no idea how this bread comes about, how it's made. He just, from his part, it grows out of the ground, it falls out of the sky. He has no idea. So one day he goes to visit a relative out in the country, and he stays there for a while, and he sees how they take these little pieces of grain, they grind it up into flour, they mix it with water, they make this dough, they put it in the oven, and look what comes out, bread. Oh, now he knows how bread is made. But he still has no idea, where did those little pieces of things, those grains, where did they come from? He had no idea. So he was, looking outside one day, and he noticed a beautiful, level piece of land. The soil is rich, level, straight. Everything looks beautiful. All of a sudden, the farmer comes out with a plow, and he starts plowing up the ground. He's making a mess. And he's wondering, what's he doing? Why is he ruining this beautiful, flat ground? And then after he does that, he sees him take those little pieces of grain that he saw they made bread out of, and starts throwing it on the ground. What are you doing? He wonders. What's he doing? Why is he ruining those great pieces of grain that you make bread out of? Why is he doing that? And not only that, then he plows over it again, putting it into the ground even deeper. He has no idea what's going on. He doesn't understand. All right? Some time passes, and he sees that these things are growing out of the ground. And eventually they grow into these big stalks of grain. The whole field is full of wheat, beautiful golden wheat. the field looks beautiful as it's covered with this lush layer of the grain. And he says, oh, okay, now I get what he was doing before. This is how it comes out. This beautiful stuff comes out of the ground. Then he sees the farmer come out, and the farmer starts whacking at it and cutting it down. And he says, what's he doing? Why is he doing this? And he goes ahead and he takes the grains and puts them into piles. And then he has these animals walking over boards on top of them. Well, he can't understand it. But then he sees that after all this is done, all those little pieces of grain that he had before, those little pieces of grain that they made the bread from, he sees them. This is where it comes from. And now everything falls into place. Now he understands the whole process of making the bread. Now, if after seeing the bread being baked, he would have gone home, he never would have understood how the rest of it happens. If after he sees the field plowed up, which he couldn't understand what it was, if he would have gone home, he would have left with a question. If he would have left after he saw the grain being cut down and being threshed, he would have left after that and not paid attention to what's going on, wait further to see what's coming out of that. Again, would have walked away with a question. Only because he saw the whole process, only because he got the whole picture, that's when everything came into place. That is the parable of life. That is the parable of the history of the world. Only Ribbono Shel Olam knows why everything in history happens the way it does nationally on a personal level. And we don't see the whole picture. We can't. We can only see part of the picture. We can only see the part of life that we're there. No one can understand, only besides Hashem, what is it that every person has to rectify for things that may have happened generations before, not just for now. So the greatest challenge to our faith is because we think we're seeing the whole picture and we're not. And our faith tells us you're not getting the whole picture. Hashem has his plan. You're not getting the whole picture. And when we understand that, that's when our emunah, our faith, can remain intact. So the half shekel is to bring out the idea you're only seeing part. You're not seeing the whole picture. And with this, the Rebbe Yosef explains, the Yerushalmi, that explains the half shekel was also a atonement for the sin of the golden calf, corresponding to the idea the Jewish people sinned at midday, therefore they give half the day, therefore they give half a shekel. The question is, what's the connection? Says the Rebbe Yosef, the connection is like this. The Jewish people were at midday. That's when they expected Moshe to come. If they would have waited longer, they would have seen him come down. So they only saw part of the day, and they assumed this is the whole thing, this is the whole picture. And because of that, came about the sin of the golden calf. If they would have realized or considered that they're only seeing part of the picture, it's not over yet, and would have waited, they would have seen Moshe come down, and none of this would have happened. It's the same idea. It's the idea that when when the Jewish people were faced with a challenge, they thought that they had the whole picture, and they clearly didn't, because a few hours later, Moshe Rabbeinu came down. So the same idea that the Jewish people assumed that they had the whole picture only when they had part of it, that caused the sin of the golden calf. The message of the half shekel which is that to retain our faith, we have to realize we only see part of the picture, attains for that same flaw, that same mistake that they had then that caused the sin of the golden calf. Now, another thing that the Rebbe Yosef explains is the following. And that is that we mentioned before that these bases they represent emunah, our faith, our belief in Hashem, and there are two of them under each board. So why are there two of them? So he explains like this. The Ramban Nachmanides tells us by the the 10 Commandments, that the first two, that the Ramban explains that the Jewish people heard from God all the 10 Commandments. The first two, which was Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Tzisich Meretz Mitzrayim, I am Hashem your God who took you out of Egypt. And the second commandment, Lo Yeh Alocha Elohim Achemim Al Panai. There should be no other gods or powers besides me, not to believe in other power but God. Those two, the Jewish people heard clearly from Hashem. They got the message clear. The other commandments, they heard Hashem's voice. They heard Hashem was saying something to them, but they didn't get it clear. Moshe Rabbeinu had to explain it to them. And why were the first two clear, says the Ramban? Because they're the main ones. Belief in Hashem and not believing in other power, that is our emunah, that's our belief, that's the foundation of everything. Those were given clearly to the Jewish people from Hashem. The other ones they knew came from Hashem, but it wasn't clear. Says the Yosef, now we know if the bases represent emunah, faith in Hashem, there were two bases representing the two mitzvahs of the Ten Commandments that are the mitzvahs of emunah, the mitzvahs of our faith, which is the basis for everything, which is the first commandment of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm Hashem your God, and the second one, Al Panai, which is prohibition against worshiping anything else but God, or believing in another power but God. The last question that the Yosef answers was the question that the Baal HaTorah writes, that the 100 blessings that a person is supposed to make every day, those blessings correspond to the 100 bases. The question is, what's the connection? So the connection is that if the bases represent emunah, faith in God, as the foundation, as the base for everything, blessings are what bring us to that emunah, that faith in Hashem. What are blessings about? Blessings are about recognizing that everything that we receive from Hashem, everything that we have, is a gift from Hashem. And we bless him for that. We thank him for that. We acknowledge him for that. That is where our emunah comes from. How do we instill our faith in God? By acknowledging him at every step. That's what the blessings are about. The same way there were 100 bases in the Mishkan that represented emunah, there are 100 blessings that are our foundation that instill emunah within us. So therefore, the bases had to come from a donation that everybody had to give, because since the bases represent our emunah, our faith in Hashem, which is the foundation, the basis for everything, everyone had to participate in it. It was the amount given was half a shekel, in order to bring out the idea of that if we're going to retain our emunah, we got to realize we're only seeing half of the picture. Half of the picture is what life is about. Everything is part of Hashem's plan, which at this point we cannot fully understand. There were two, and that's the connection to the midday sin of the golden calf. The Jewish people by midday figured that they had seen everything they need to see and everything they need to know about Moshe Rabbeinu coming down. And the truth is, it was only part of the picture. There are two bases to each board, because since the bases represent our emunah, our belief in Hashem, therefore there are two of them corresponding to the two of the 10 commandments that are the commandments about emunah, about our faith in Hashem. And we have 100 blessings every day corresponding to the 100 bases, because 100 bases represent our emunah, our belief in Hashem. And we get that from the blessings that we make every day. And therefore, we make 100 of them every day. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Have a great night. Be well.